But it couldn't have been more than like maybe 8 or 9 kids altogether. And like none of them were above maybe the age of 13 at the oldest.
Yeah.
And the youngest was like maybe 6 or something. But they formulated their own neighborhood quote unquote gang.
Oh, pff.
Yeah, so
Like the Little Rascals, like our gang.
no, they were like, East Side, West Side,
Oh,
fucking,
psh.
like, they wanted to be fucking actual, like, gangbangers.
Oh, so not like
know?
the It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia gang,
no,
but
no,
like
no, no.
gang bangers.
No, yeah, so,
Okay.
like, fucking the leader of the gang in, like, my part of the neighborhood, her name was Dawn, and she used to always, like, bully me and shit. She was
Aw.
built like a fucking mini fridge. But...
Jeez.
the leader of like the other little like quote unquote gang, his name was Cortez, and I remember one time he crawled up on top of like the playground equipment
Yeah.
and peed on Don's little brother's head from up there.
Oh, gross.
And that started a whole big fucking fight. But yeah, all these little kids were just running around trying to pretend to be gangbangers. Meanwhile, here I am trying to pretend to be like a kitty cat or something.
Aw.
Or like, when I got a little bit older, like a sexy werewolf or some shit. But,
Man, whenever I was a kid, like, we didn't have, like, gangs or anything like that, but we did have the older kids, like, try to instigate fights, between
God.
us. Yeah, so, like, there was, like, this kid named Jeff. He was, like, the only white kid, like, on our whole street, and his dad, worked for the tribe, so that's why, he lived on the res.
oh wait, was that the same Jeff that sent us the acid?
No. He's from another town in Oklahoma.
Okay, different Jeff.
Different
Gotcha.
Jeff, yeah. And anyway, so this Jeff that lived on my street, only white kids, so of course people picked on him. And there were these older kids. There was like Jerry, who introduced me to like Iron Maiden and MC Hammer. And then there was
Nice.
like Marion and Nasharo, who introduced me to Mike Tyson's Punch Out and Two Live Crew whenever I was like 8.
Oh my god.
But anyway, so they would go around and like, talk shit to kids down the street, say, hey, so-and-so was talking shit about you, said you had a dirty wiener. And then like, they would just fight and they would laugh, and just kind of, yuck it up. And he went up to Jeff and he was like, hey, so-and-so down the street was talking about your mom's mustache. He said he likes it. It tickles when he kisses her. And he got so mad. That was like one of the most brutal, like little kid fights that I'd like seen in like a long time.
oh man.
But like Halloween.
Kids are dumb.
Oh, kids are like super dumb. It was great. But Halloween was like the greatest time down there because all the the older kids were off.
I got to
doing
dress
their...
up like a kitty cat. Of
Oh,
course, it
man.
was great.
I dressed up like Captain N and then like Dracula. I was like Mega Man one year,
I was a kitty cat pretty much every year until I was like 14.
Oh,
Yeah.
and then that's whenever you discovered like what all teenagers and 20-somethings discover about Halloween is that it's more of a let's get slutty and drunk kind of
No,
holiday.
yeah, that's when I became goth.
Yeah.
Definitely. And then instead of kitty cats and stuff, I was like, oh, I want to be a vampire and I want to read Anne Rice and fucking... Anyway.
No, like whenever I was that age, I was just more concerned with, like in 6th grade, I thought it was cool to like, prank people, especially like the girls that I liked,
Oh
so
my
I'd, like
god, you were
TP
one of
their
those boys.
I was 12, I didn't know any better.
I would have beat you up.
I was listening to Nine Inch Nails by myself and then going out like 1 a.m.
Okay, well, that's cool.
But I don't know, man. I kind of miss Halloween as a kid. Like there was this house in my small town. They were the Maltzbergers. It was like one of the administrators at my
That's a very
school.
delicious name.
It was. But she took Halloween seriously. Mrs. Maltzberger's house was badass. And one year I was 6 and I was like an army man for Halloween. I had like my, my little toy Uzi.
Oh, so you were like real little.
I was real little. And she, her front yard was all like fenced off. I walk up there, I have my candy, I have my toy gun, I'm ready for scary shit.
Yeah.
And they were playing one of those tapes that had all the spooky noises. It sounds like that one Aghast album. And it was all kinds of spooky stuff. So we walk in there and there's like caution tape and fake gravestones and some weird scary shit hanging out of the trees and strobe lights, and it was like, ooh. And I was just kind of a little overwhelmed. I was 6.
Yeah.
And there's this dude, he's like on top of the roof. It was like a 2-story house, but on the first story, it had its own kind of like little roof
Ledge
section.
of
Yeah,
some
yeah.
kind.
So he was up there and he was like wearing this sheet and it was kind of short. It was like toga length so you could see his knees. So
Fuck.
he was super muscly. He like had big muscly arms and big muscly legs.
So
but
there
it
was just this big muscly Roman standing on the roof?
Well, he was a ghost because it like the sheet was covering his head.
Oh,
you
he
know?
was wearing it over his... Okay, I
So
gotcha.
it would, but it only
This
came
is
down
like
to above his...
beefcake ghost.
It was the beefcake ghost. Pac-Man would not stand a chance against this dude. So I, walk into the yard and he points at me and he goes, "Oh!" And I'm like,
Oh, no.
And then there's like a zip line like on the top of the fucking roof and he grabs it and he zip lines at me. I'm like, "Ah!" So I started like shooting my little toy machine gun, like rat-a-tat, and it didn't do anything. And so I threw the gun and I turn around and I start running and I fall and I drop my candy.
Oh, fuck.
And he felt so bad. He picks me up and dusts me off and helps pick my candy back up. And he walks me to the house so I could get more candy. And
That's cute.
yeah, I see. I missed that aspect of Halloween. That was fucking cool.
I don't even think kids do that anymore these days.
Man, I saw like some kids at Keiko-ween today, and they were all dressed up. Yeah, we had Dallas.
Oh, yeah, I saw the live feed, yeah.
Yeah, Dallas Sumo Club had Keiko-ween, and there were some kids. There was a Scooby-Doo, there was a killer clown, and Godzilla. And, they were Godzilla was Siriashing around.
I saw that.
But then when they were fighting, that reminded me, I was like, I kind of see what this is about. Watching little kids fight and do sumo reminded me of like the older kids back home, pitting us against you. I was like, I see why they did that now. So
it's just fun to watch, like, to watch kids like beat each other up.
It really is. I don't know. But now I really want to get serious about, trying to foster youth sumo just so I could just watch kids fight, all the time. Be like, yeah.
Tell them, you see that other kid on the other side of the dojo? Yeah, he's telling everybody you got skid marks in your mawashi.
Ooh. Yeah, someone's going to get a harite.
Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx. Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx. Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx. Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx, Sumo Punx.
Konnichiwa, and thank you for joining us. My name is Matt.
And my name is Sabrina.
And this is Sumo Crime Time.
Actually, this is the Sumo Punx podcast.
Yeah.
And we're doing a true crime episode.
Crime.
Corey Morrison, the Oyakata of the Dallas Sumo Club, actually suggested this to us right after the Cowboy Cup, I think it was. Yeah, it was like at the after party. We were totally sloshed. But we decided Halloween would be a good time to do it. Crime's kind of spooky.
Yeah.
But we actually learned a lot of really interesting things researching this episode.
Yeah, we took a bit of a deep dive into some more of the social and cultural aspects, and not so much just rehashing the same scandals everybody always does, that's all over the news, but we kind of really just stuck our feet in the mud pit of the underbelly of
Kinky. Before we get into the meat of this episode, though, we do want to let everybody know what some of the upcoming sumo events are around you and elsewhere. First up, we have November 5th, the Swiss Sumo Open International Tournament, organized by the infamous Richard Neal himself. Yeah. See lots of wrestlers from around the world, eat some chocolate, go yodeling in the Alps. I don't know what they do in Switzerland.
Isn't yodeling in the Alps like a euphemism?
A euphemism?
For being a cunning linguist?
Oh, for eating pussy. I don't know. We'll have to ask Richard. Then around the same time, November 5th to 6th, in fact, the Fort Worth Fall Festival will be happening at the Fort Worth Botanical Gardens. The Dallas Sumo Club will be hanging out and doing some fun stuff all day. And we'll also be doing sumo demos on the main stage at around 3 p.m. on both days.
And it is both days. I have confirmed. It is November 5th and November 6th, Saturday and Sunday. And we're going to be there both days.
Well, I'm not going to be there because I have to work Saturday, but I'll be there Sunday. Then, oh, this is the big one.
The big
November
one.
12th, the one we've been waiting for so long, ever since the Consulates Cup anyway. The Houston Sumo Open, hosted by Shogeki Sumo Club. This has now moved venues. It will be a part of the Tokyo Night Festival still, but the new location is going to be at the Texas Festival Grounds. So it's still in Houston, it's just in a different part of Houston.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty fucking cool. I'm really excited about this.
Yeah, I actually follow the Tokyo Night Festival Instagram account, and I saw today where they posted a video of like all of the solar panels that they had bought and set up to like bring electricity to the event. It is pretty cool.
And it's sponsored by, isn't it sponsored by like a temple or something like that? One of the sponsors?
Yeah, there is actually a Japanese, like in Japan, Shinto temple, I believe.
Yeah.
Nicholas Ton, please correct me if I am incorrect. But yeah, there is an actual Japanese temple.
And then the
sponsors
master
that.
of ceremonies is supposed to be a former pro Rikishi.
That's what I heard.
Yeah, Kumayama.
Yeah. Oh my god, I can't wait to meet Kumayama.
Hell yeah.
Or I guess they go by Kuma now.
Kuma.
Then on November 13th, this is going to be at the University of West Florida in the International Affairs building. It's a sumo demo for the Japan Culture Day. I think it's going to be put on by Ronin
Sumo?
Yeah.
Or the Florida Sumo Kyokai? Or
Something like that. It's from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern. And apparently it's got something to do with Florida Sumo. I'm not exactly sure.
So it's Brandon McLeod's. It's his demo, and I'm not sure under which, if it's going to be the Ronin Sumo
Under
or if
which
it's Florida.
branding.
Yeah, under which branding. So
Yeah.
I'm still going to say Ronin Sumo because I have the Ronin Sumo Bea t-shirt, and I really love that
Well,
shirt.
either way, I'm sure they're going to be doing their brand of sumo.
Ba-doom, psh, Building 71.
Yes. So then November 25th through 27th will be Anime Dallas, where Dallas Sumo Club will be doing demonstrations and holding a panel about sumo in anime and manga. We have done a couple of episodes about this on the podcast already.
Yeah.
I have to fucking work on both days. I am so mad that I will not be able to show up to this one.
Yeah, well, it's 25th, 26th, and 27th.
Yeah.
So depending on when the date is, we're not exactly
I might not
sure.
be able to show up for the panels, but I'm going to try to show up for the other stuff.
Hell yeah,
So-
watch us like sumo around people in cosplay and stuff.
Yeah.
It's
Oh
gonna
my
be a
God,
whole lot
I
of
should
fun.
do cosplay. Who should I cosplay? I'm going to cosplay that like demon chick from
Chainsaw Man?
Chainsaw Man.
Oh, Power?
Yeah. Or,
You're gonna
no,
be Power?
She's not a demon, she's a fiend.
She's a fiend.
Yeah, fuck yeah.
She's got those horns and
do.
yeah, I think her name's Power, right?
Something like
Yeah,
shit.
be Power.
I don't know.
Anyway,
I've only watched like what, 2 episodes?
two
so far?
episodes.
Anyway,
And then December 3rd is the Ronin Sumo Tournament hosted by Ronin Sumo Bea at The Gym in
Quote,
Defuniak
unquote.
Springs, Florida.
the gym.
The Gym.
That's
and,
the name of the place. It's just called the gym.
and there will be a youth division.
Yay, youth sumo.
Yeah. I don't quite remember the time, but once we get the time, we'll note the time and everything when it gets closer to December. But it's gonna be really fucking cool. You all should go out to that tournament in December.
Hopefully there will be a live stream so we
That's
can watch
what
it
I'm
if
hoping.
we can't go.
Man, I just really wish I would just fall outside into a hole, and then whenever I pick myself up, I just kind of find a suitcase of money that I could use for plane tickets.
Oh, I thought you were talking about falling into a hole, and I was like, portal technology? Is that what we're talking
Okay,
about?
well, if we had portal technology, then I wouldn't need to fall in a suitcase of
Remember
money.
when that was such a huge meme, like
Yeah.
back in 2008 or whatever? Besides those upcoming events, we did also want to mention something that we mentioned on the last episode. 2 of the guys at Dallas Sumo Club had their mawashis stolen, and we asked y'all to donate if you could to help them get new mawashis before the next tournament. Turns out within just a couple of days,
It was like maybe
they
1 or
got
2
enough
days.
donations
Yeah.
to actually buy 2 new mawashis. You guys fucking kick ass!
yeah, thank
you!
you!
On behalf of the Garza brothers, thank everyone who donated. And even if you couldn't donate, thanks for caring. And if
Yeah.
you didn't care, that's fine too. Do your own thing. We're not judging. Well, it's time. And now, let's get criminal.
Sumo crime time.
Yeah! So I just wanted to just start off with a disclaimer. The contents of this episode is based on whatever information we could find on them internets regarding these crimes. Some of it in languages we do not even speak and had to translate. So don't get your mawashis in a twist if a few details are missed or incorrect. We tried, damn it.
And this is kind of like a subject that, as like a huge fan of sumo, the thought of it kind of bums me out. If you really think about it, sometimes sumo wrestlers, especially the people that are in charge of the sumo wrestlers, they're just people. They're human beings.
Exactly. They're not some sort of like demigods. I know, they kind of are
in a social-cultural kind of...
Yeah, in the Shinto religion, but they're humans and they make human mistakes and they have human motivations.
Yeah. Honestly, a lot of this stuff kind of really does hit home for me in a way because I come from a warrior culture who had been, disenfranchised, who had their way of life drastically change. And, here I am in this warrior culture with not really having a good valid outlet for it. And within, a lot of indigenous communities, there is a lot of violence, a lot of mental health issues, suicides 4 times that of the national rate. So, I come from a place that's similar to what had happened to, let's say, the samurai class during the Meiji Restoration. Pretty much it was illegal to be a samurai for a while. And what were these warriors going to do? They couldn't wear their chonmage. Only sumo wrestlers could wear a chonmage at that time. You couldn't carry a sword out in public. It's pretty much like your very identity was stripped from you. And that's exactly what happened to indigenous people. So I feel that like really hard. And whenever things like that happen, you tend to, your mind goes to a bad place. Now think of this happening to a whole generation of young men, older men. They're raised in this kind of macho, kind of violent warrior culture, and then they have no outlet for it. They're just completely disenfranchised.
Of course they're
going to
do
away.
Crime.
Yeah. So, knowing that a bit of the roots of the Yakuza are from the samurai class, knowing that people that had their identity stripped away had to resort to something to not only make themselves feel like warriors again, but something to support themselves because their means of supporting themselves is gone, being a warrior. So they turn to things like organized crime. Unfortunately, that's happened in my community too. Not to an extent like the Yakuza, but anyway. And then look at...
Oh my God, could you imagine if there were like an indigenous American Yakuza?
Oh, geez. But, in Japan, there was also, what happened with World War II, with the national cultural consciousness and with nationalism. And, it's just kind of...
That's still a problem in Japan.
Yeah, to this day.
I mean, that's still a problem in the U.S. and other places, too.
But it's just been kind of a recipe for disaster with this. And, from an anthropological or sociological perspective, it is really interesting, from the outside looking in. However, as someone that's experienced this from the inside looking out, so a very similar situation, I really do feel for these guys. I feel for them on a level that I could identify with all too well.
Yeah, they're not just subjects of these stories. They are people who exist in the world.
Yeah. I really don't want to ruin sumo for anybody or, the joy that people get out of sumo. What I would really rather do is show sumo as it exists, show all aspects of sumo as it truly is.
Warts and all.
And yeah, exactly, warts and all. Instead of placing it on a pedestal and, having too lofty of expectations out of, people that are just human beings.
Well, I was actually watching an interview with Konishiki recently where he was talking about his motivations for the new book that he's writing, and that's pretty much what he said. He's writing it so that young men who are thinking about going into pro sumo will know what they're getting into, and I'm really interested to see what kind of stories he has about that.
Oh, yeah.
Now, here are the stories that we were able to dig up in our research. As we were just discussing, violence in the world of sumo is nothing new, which may not really be surprising for a sport that is highly insular and centered around power struggles both on and off the dojo. By now, most listeners are probably already aware of what many would consider to be the worst of the violence, as far as we know anyway, and that is the tragic beating death of the teenage Rishi, Toki Taizan in 2007 at the hand of his stable master and fellow wrestlers, the cause of which would not have even been discovered if his father had not demanded an autopsy. In the spirit of the season, where the atmosphere naturally turns toward the grim, we're going to take a look at some infamous as well as overlooked scandals in the world of sumo, covering both the criminal and the curious, that perhaps the JSA and others at the top of the sumo hierarchy would like to keep in the shadows. So to start out with, I kind of just want to talk about something a little more lighthearted, actually. Namely, my favorite sumo scandal involving Osuna Arashi driving without a license and then crashing his car, apparently, getting into a whole bunch of trouble with the JSA and then having to leave the world of pro sumo. So we were actually talking to Natalie and Caitlin from Dallas Sumo Club earlier today. That interview is going to be coming out a bit later. But we asked them if they had heard about that incident, and we kind of got into this conversation about why is it that sumo wrestlers aren't allowed to drive?
Yeah. I mean, is it because they, as part of the diet, you got to drink a lot of beer? I mean, that's how you pack pounds on and pack calories. Yet it's not just chanko nabe and rice. Drink a shit ton of beer, too. That'll put some bulk on you.
I would imagine if you're drunk a lot of the time, they probably don't want the people that are making them all of their money to be driving as well.
Yeah, these belligerent rikishi who have been fucking chugging beer and sake all night long, getting behind the wheel and crashing into shit.
It's funny you say belligerent too, because Osuna Arashi is also a main character in my favorite amateur sumo scandal, which is Backflip Gate, which many of you might know happened at the last World Games. That guy is such a character. I'm not talking shit on him or anything. I think it's...
He's got a big personality.
Exactly. He does have a very big personality, and I can just imagine being in the crowd at the World Games and being, just terrified of the coach of the Egyptian sumo team just going the fuck off. And, while wearing this, what was he wearing? A tank top with, little
a turquoise
hibiscus flowers and skulls on it. Adorable. And then learning later oh, this was the guy that had to leave the JSA for one of the most piddly reasons I can think of. I think the dumbest reason someone has gotten kicked out of the JSA is for smoking weed. Because God. I will say it right here and right now, it should be legal to smoke weed, goddammit.
You know what's even more fucked up is Kisei no Sato has that brand of CBD gummies and shit that he's talking. Same fucking plant.
Exactly.
That's ridiculous to me. But I think that anyone that had been kicked out for... And Sumo Kaboom did a whole episode about this as well and brought up some really good points. But it's that whole pedestal thing, where everyone that's involved in sumo is set to a higher moral standard, and they're supposed to be role models and upstanding citizens. But
well, it's like you were saying just a minute ago, these people are humans. They do human things. As much as the spiritual aspect of it likes to view them as demigods or whatever, they still are mortal, and they make mortal mistakes.
Definitely mortal mistakes.
And smoking weed is not a mistake.
That's exactly what I was gonna say. I was like, just let those dudes smoke some weed. They're in enough pain. Let the rikishi
smoke weed. Exactly. They've all got some sort of injury
or joint issues.
Exactly.
Give them another joint issue.
Yeah, give joints for their joints. Why the fuck not? Come on, maybe it'll make him better at wrestling. You don't know. Yeah. A lot of the top rikishi probably.
Word around the campfire. If you listen to some of these guys that have been hanging out in the sumo world, or reading those Jake Adelstein books.
Oh yeah.
They talk about it a lot. It's not just the booze.
There are actually former pro rikishi living in the U.S. now that have talked a bit about what goes on behind closed doors. We're not going to name names or anything, but I found that pretty interesting.
Oh, yeah.
So, one of the first more serious stories I wanted to go into is probably one that a lot of people already do know about. And what's notable about this one is that it actually involves a yokozuna.
Yokozuna gone wild.
Woo! Oh my god.
Spring break.
That's a blast from the past. I totally forgot about those.
Oh god, that was fucking awful.
Gone wild videos. So this actually only happened about 5 years ago, October 25th, 2017 to be exact. A group of Mongolian rishi who had all attended the same Japanese high school met for a dinner party in Tottori to foster camaraderie and celebrate their achievements. In attendance were the Yokozuna Hakuho and Haruma Fuji, as well as many lower-ranked wrestlers. As Hakuho attempted to give a speech during the dinner, a lower-ranked rishi, Takanoiwa, had displayed some rude behavior, staring at his phone during the speech, not paying attention, and just generally being a jackass. Hakuho called him out on his behavior, and at first, Haruma Fuji actually attempted to cover for Takanoiwa. However, after the dinner party, while they were all at an after party at a karaoke bar,
Oh no.
apparently the booze was flowing very freely, and
yeah.
tensions got a bit high again.
Oh no, don't give all those angry fucking Rikishi booze.
Well, you would think they're used to it.
You would.
Yeah. So Takano Iwa reportedly told the two Yokozuna, quote, "Your era is over," while
Wait.
not even looking up from his phone.
Wait. Okay, he said your era is over?
Yes, he said, "Your era is over."
Okay, so did he like bang on the table and was all like, your era is over?
Was it like Shang Tsung when he's like, "Your soul is mine. Your era is over."
That's a little intense. Or was he just kind of thumbing around on his phone?
Yeah, he was just like looking through his Instagram like, "Your era's over."
So, I mean, like, I just kind of want to know how dramatic it was. If he didn't look up from his phone, I mean, it could have just sounded flippant. I mean, it would still be infuriating either way.
Somebody should have world starred that shit, man. Because what happens next is just, it is way over the top. So he says, "Your era is over," while not even looking up from his phone, which enrages Haruma Fuji so much that he started beating the younger Rikishi with either a beer bottle or the karaoke machine remote. That part isn't too clear.
But with something.
Some sort of foreign object. At one point, he grabbed a champagne bottle and tried to hit him with it. Apparently, there was an ice pick involved.
Jesus fucking Christ.
Yeah, shit got gnarly. Hakuho had to drag his fellow Yokozuna out of the karaoke room to get him to stop beating Takano Iwa. One of the bar employees reported that Takano Iwa had been hit over the head 20 to 30 times.
Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, I know in a lot of these situations they will say, well, he was so drunk, he didn't remember, he had so much booze, he couldn't, control himself, but, man, come on.
20 to 30 times, that's like a good, minute and a half of beating the brakes off somebody.
Yeah, okay, if you think about it, how many seconds does it take to swing your arm with, a champagne bottle in it?
And then
maybe
muster the energy up. And then you got to kind of aim, too,
Well, and it's not going to be equal every time because, I'm sure the guy was trying to get away from him.
Yeah, exactly.
So he's got to, chase after him to hit him a few times.
Fucking Scooby-Doo shit, damn.
Terrible. I don't know. It's really worse than some Scooby-Doo shit.
Yeah.
Takano Iwa was taken to a local hospital where they discovered he had a skull fracture.
Jesus.
And was leaking cerebrospinal fluid.
God damn.
Yeah, he spent 12 days in the hospital and missed 2 tournaments due to his injuries. At one point after the incident, Hakuho had stated that he thought Haruma Fuji had only used his hands to beat the other Rikishi, but I kind of think maybe he was just trying to protect his Yokozuna friend. I mean, it could be possible, I guess, to injure someone that badly with just your hands, but I'm betting it was definitely more than just that.
I mean, if you think about it like this, your hands are the most delicate part of the skeleton, and then the head is like the hardest. So, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to punch someone in the head. You don't fuck your hands up, so.
Exactly. If that's what was going on, why didn't Harumafuji have like a bunch of busted fingers?
Well, yeah, probably because they had that karaoke remote.
Exactly. Oh, also, did I mention all of this happened during a tournament?
Oof.
The November Basho in Kyushu was still ongoing as the incident was being investigated. Hakuho had actually made a statement, essentially hoping the two Rikishi involved in the incident could re-enter the tournament again soon, for which he was harshly reprimanded by the JSA chairman Hakaku. Because, of course, if Hakaku has a chance to reprimand Hakuho, he's gonna fucking do
every
it.
chance he gets. Like, Jesus, I don't know why he has such a boner for fucking wanting to just tell Hakuho where to shove it, but
That's his fetish.
yeah. But if you think about it, Hakuho was handling it the best that he could. You being
Right.
as diplomatic as possible, and when you're a Yokozuna, all eyes are on you to be the the fucking leader, to be the big boy, out of the thing. But
Well, we haven't even gotten to one of the most outrageous aspects of this yet. So, no one is really sure what the motivation was behind this decision, but Takano Iwa's stable master, the former Yokozuna Takano Hana, waited 2 weeks before informing the JSA that he had reported the incident to the police. The fact he informed the cops first instead of the JSA was seen as an attempt to undermine the JSA's authority, as they prefer to handle such matters in-house. So they demoted him in retaliation. And of course, you'd think if the JSA wanted to avoid calling attention to their historic ties to the Yakuza, maybe they'd stop, acting like the fucking Yakuza by avoiding legal means of recourse and not having full transparency.
well, I was reading this while I was doing a lot of this research. I ran into this scholarly article by someone who actually got to really study how the JSA's internal workings operate. He is at the time he was just an academic, just a law student, and that was just for a project he wanted. And he stated that whenever he approached the JSA, they were asking him, "Oh, well, what kind of stuff are you looking for? What kind of things do you want to do?" And he told them, "I'm a law student. I want to see kind of how the JSA works. I'm studying something called firms, which is basically an in-house justice system,
Yeah.
of a particular group." So not relying on external policing or, external laws governing, they do it all themselves, all in-house. I mean, that's the best way that I could think to put it. So basically the way the Yakuza operates is like a firm, and pretty much the JSA operates in a very similar manner, that same kind of firm. And I don't know, possibly that could be because of the, the samurai lineage,
It
just
kind
kind
of
of
makes
how...
me wonder if the JSA is set up basically as their own... I know there's probably some differences, but is it basically just its own Yakuza family, and that's why there's... Well, okay, we're going to get into some
We're
of the
gonna get into
connections in a moment. But I do want to say that Takano Hana was understandably tired of their shit.
Yeah.
And so he relocated all of his Rikishi to different stables and just quit. Hey, that rhymed. I didn't mean to write that like that. Harumafuji decided it would be best if he just retired, as it was pretty clear the JSA was probably going to kick him out anyway. So, in a way, Takano Iwa was right. His era was over.
Womp womp.
The resulting summary court case had him paying a 500,000 yen fine, or about 4,400 US dollars. Takano Iwa then filed a lawsuit against the former Yokozuna seeking 24 million yen in damages, but the lawsuit was later dropped due to Takano Iwa's family being threatened and harassed back in Mongolia.
Oh, fuck.
Yeah.
That's some beef. Oh, God.
That's the Mongolian beef.
Oh, Jesus. You just couldn't help yourself.
I couldn't.
I think I'm madder because you beat me to it. So I was going to say that.
You were going... Okay.
I was going to say it, then I
My
thought
bad.
maybe I shouldn't say that. And you totally just
I have
blurted
no
it
shame. So, in an ironic twist, A year later, during the 2018 Kyushu Basho, Takano Iwa assaulted a lower stablemate, slapping and punching him several times for neglecting to pack a needed item for their stay in Fukuoka. Shortly after, Takano Iwa submitted his resignation to the JSA. I think John Gunning had some really interesting insight into this and similar issues in the world of sumo that will probably be a running theme in this episode. In a quote I found on a German news site, dw.com, he says, here, I'll try to put on a John Gunning voice. A lot that goes on in the... No, wait, that's really bad. A lot that goes on in the sumo world gets hushed up, and I am sure that similar incidents in the future will not come out. There is a sense within sumo that this sort of violence is acceptable and just part and parcel for the sport. We have young guys who fight every morning in training, who have no money, no rights, and no outlets for the aggression that inevitably builds up. If a stable master does not keep tight control over his wrestlers, then the violence becomes the only way they can take out their frustrations. And you have to remember that stable masters today were wrestlers in the past, and they had an even rougher time of it. They say that young wrestlers today have an easy life, so a few slaps, a bit of physical punishment, should not be a big deal to them.
What I think that means is that John Gunning is aware of how the JSA's internal firm, their internal justice system workings, has really normalized that kind of violence. To them, that's just, run-of-the-mill everyday shit.
Yeah, like that would explain why they got so angry when Takano Hana went to the police before them.
Yeah. And what's really kind of shitty about the whole thing is it's that whole violence, the whole hazing thing, and them just thinking, oh well, that's just how it is. That's normal. That's what really turns a whole lot of the younger generation off to sumo. They're like, oh, fuck it, I'd rather do soccer.
Well, the kids are just soft. They just, complain about it because they don't know what it was like back in the day when we got beaten with 2 baseball bats instead of 1.
But Japanese society as a whole has progressed to the point to where they're like, no, that type of shit is wrong. That's fucked up. Mm-hmm. And maybe it was commonplace, in some of the older generations. I don't doubt that one bit.
And the JSA as a whole is a very conservative institution.
But Japanese society definitely recognizes that shit's just wrong. That shit, and it's the JSA themselves that are refusing to get with the times. And that's what they're saying in complaint, that, oh, well, the kids today are just soft. And if you think about it, that's what's turning off the younger generation to wanting to do sumo. The training's too hard. They're afraid they're going to get the shit kicked out of them all the time, and they're not going to make it to the secretary status. And so they're like, oh, God, I'd just rather fucking play baseball.
Yeah, if I'm just going to get treated like shit the whole time and then never even make a salary, as most Rikishi experience, the vast majority of Rikishi never make it up to the secretary ranks.
Yeah.
So they're in this position where they're expected to be at the beck and call of the senior Rikishi at all times.
Pretty much wipe their ass for them.
They're expected to take the violence from the senior Rikishi and just deal with it.
And everyone's just supposed to say, well, that's just how it is. That's okay. No, everyone is pretty much saying that shit ain't cool.
Fuck no, that shit ain't cool. Shit ain't like that.
The words of Ice-T.
It's real fucked up.
Can't believe you just quoted Ice-T.
However, in the world of sumo, it's not just the pros who can sometimes get up to some egregiously bad behavior involving violence, gangs, and even murder.
Ooh.
That brings us to our next story. Peter Stoyanov was a 6-time European champion in sumo and head of the Bulgarian Sumo Federation. Bulgaria has had its fair share of notable sumo greats, such as the former Sekiwaki and current Maegashira Aoyama, and the former Ozeki Koto Oshu, now head of Naruto Stable,
Coach
who
Naruto
was apparently a close friend, quote-unquote, of Stoyanov. At the height of his sumo career, Stoyanov weighed around 160 kilos, or roughly 350 pounds, and stood about 204 centimeters, or 6 foot 8 inches tall. So he's a really big boy.
Yeah, that's like Robert size.
Yeah, he's a biggin for sure. I mean, you're slightly less tall than he is.
I'm 6'4", but hey, I've met some folks that make me feel like I could wear them as a mech.
That you can just climb them as a tree.
Yeah.
Well, it was rumored, but never confirmed, that he was also an advisor to former Bulgarian President Georgy Parvanov, the chair of the Parliamentary Committee on Education, Science, Children, Youth, and Sports, confirmed that Stoyanov was an adjunct advisor for the committee.
Whoa.
In 2012, Peter Stoyanov was convicted of murder after leading a group of assassins as part of a notorious organized crime group known as the Killers.
That band sucks.
Oh, shit. They should have called him Mr. Brightside. No, he does actually get a goofy nickname. He was actually known as the Chieftain.
Buh.
And in 2008 and 2009, he took part in the murder of at least 3 men. A lawyer, Peter Lupov, a businessman named Rumen Machev, who had apparently been moving money around in ways the gang didn't like, as well as a football club president, Yuri Galev. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing these names correct. I do not speak Bulgarian. And while researching this case, I did discover that's actually pretty common in Bulgaria. A lot of football club presidents are apparently murdered there.
Jesus.
Yeah, I'm not sure what it is. Apparently,
Soccer gangs, man.
at least around the time of these particular murders happening, a whole lot of football clubs were mysteriously coming up with dead presidents. And, I mean, that can be interpreted in various ways, too, since football clubs in Bulgaria are apparently also often fronts for organized crime.
But it kind of puts a whole different spin on football hooligan.
Exactly. This whole case was a complete mess. From what I was able to find out, it does appear Stoyanov was responsible for the murders, and the Killers gang has definitely been responsible for many more murders before and since. But Bulgaria was notably quite corrupt during this era. One of the issues that Stoyanov's lawyers faced was that he was first arrested while driving a stolen car that he apparently did not even know was stolen, while possessing an illegal AK-47.
Wah, wah.
Which was later determined to be planted by the police.
Jeez.
That shit is just... How do you... You're already arresting him on murder charges.
Yeah, just
while
and then
he's
sprinkle
driving
some
a
crack
stolen
on him.
car. Why even bother planting the weapon?
Yeah, plant an AK on him, sprinkle some crack on him. We're taking him to jail.
Jesus Christ. It's like people who say politicians only care about money. Oh, and they're also aliens. Like, isn't the first thing bad enough? There's no need to embellish. You're just making it less likely that people will believe the first part is true. Anywho, other charges for which Stoyanov was convicted as part of his gang activities include beatings, arson, and usury. Usury is one of my favorite crimes because huge chunks of our economy and almost every obscenely rich person would not exist without it. It's actually a sin in the Bible. Look that shit up.
Oh my god, we need to sample like that reading rainbow sound right there. Where it's just like
The more you know. I don't expect people to go out and read the Bible to learn about this stuff. I'm sure you can find it in like Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah.
But yeah, this story I thought was just so interesting because it was something that was outside of pro sumo. And these guys apparently would get like hired out as bodyguards, and it got me thinking about the whole concept of like sumo wrestlers as bodyguards, but they're also like mafia dudes and like I don't know. It was just
sumo gangbangers.
and it does kind of have parallels to what happens in pro sumo as well, because a lot of rikishi who retire do end up becoming like people's personal bodyguards or bodyguards for different
Enforcers or
establishments and what have you.
bouncers.
Sometimes they even get into organized crime themselves. But to understand how that could possibly happen, we first would like to take a look at the very similar history between sumo and the Japanese Yakuza.
Sumo is an ancient sport with deep historical ties to the samurai and previous Japanese periods. During the Japanese Middle Ages, it moved out of the courts of the emperors and into the realms of the various daimyo, where sumo was used as military training. Particularly adept rikishi who pleased the daimyo with their skills would be made into samurai themselves.
See, if I go and try to please the daimyo with my skills,
Yeah, God.
he's not going to make me a samurai. But go on.
After the samurai class,
I know what you're thinking, too. You have a dirty mind. You don't know what kind of skills I was talking about. I could have been baking him pastries or something.
Whatever, I know how you are.
Make that man some corn dogs.
After the samurai class was abolished in the late 1800s, sumo wrestlers were the only people allowed to continue wearing the traditional samurai hairstyle, or the chonmage. Organized crime in Japan also has ancient ties to the samurai, though in very different ways than sumo. Although it is hard to pin down an origin story for the Yakuza, one of the theories is that they either grew out of roving bands of ronin, masterless samurai who would sometimes menace the villages they stopped in, or possibly growing out of the opposition to the ronin when communities would band together to combat these wandering warriors. Either way, over the years, the Yakuza grew to incorporate many samurai principles and rituals into their organizations and activities. During the Edo period, early versions of Yakuza bosses were granted a social status close to that of samurai, even being allowed to dual-wield swords and have their own surname.
I can't even imagine, like, maybe it would be easier to not have your own surname now that I'm thinking about it.
Well,
You'd only
hardly-
have one name to keep track of.
Yeah, you're just like, dude, son of dude, or whatever.
Dude, son of dude. And here's my other son, Guy, son of dude.
Pretty much, yeah. I saw something, it was like an old fresco, and there was like this, I can't remember what his name was. It was like Pollux, or, like Castor and Pollux. It was like one was named Pollux, and the other was anti-Pollux. So basically, he just named his kids Pollux and not Pollux.
Wow.
It's just so fucking goofy.
God, only the Romans. Those are my people. I would not put it past them.
According to Masahiro Matsumura, professor of international politics at St. Andrews University in Osaka, sumo evolved over many centuries as public entertainment in which the wrestlers, trainers, and promoters depended on local gangs to secure facilities and audiences, including selling the tickets. This cozy relationship was supposedly dissolved when the hierarchy of sumo was modernized into what is now the JSA. Remember when we were watching the Chrysanthemum and the Guillotine? Or is it the Guillotine? That's kind of what happened, except it wasn't really a local... Well, I guess it was a gang, but it wasn't like a Yakuza gang. They were just those young leftist radicals, those little anarchist kids. And they got into some shit. They got into some trouble, but they were the ones that were like, come watch women sumo.
Yeah.
So that tracks. I could see that.
The little anarchist Ronin.
Yeah. To this day, a huge portion of the JSA's income is still coming from ticket sales. But Japan's wealthiest people, such as entrepreneurs, medical doctors, and lawyers, are no longer as willing or able to continue patronizing the sport, particularly since Japan's economic upheaval of the early 90s. Instead, these respectable supporters have gradually been replaced over the years by a shady new class who gained their wealth through loan sharking and other dubious businesses. As a result, some sumo stables have become associated in one way or another with people running front companies for Yakuza organizations. Even the Yakuza's traditional means of profit have shifted over the decades due to shifts in the economy. Their virtues of manliness and loyalty could no longer be used in the way like they were in the past, like in the 50s when they were hired by ministers and industrialists to violently suppress movements for workers' rights. This almost made a partnership with the patriarchal institution of sumo inevitable.
Yeah,
So
that makes sense. So they're both very patriarchal in that way, very like macho manly dudes. And what do macho manly dudes do when they can't do their macho duties? They find other avenues to do that, right?
yeah, and they're
They
very
can't just evolve as human beings. They have to, follow their
then
caveman brain.
and being very insecure about masculinity, they're going to make some very bad decisions.
Well, and part of that is because of all of the rules that they have built up for that masculinity as well. Like, you can't be
Yeah.
a real man unless you do this, this, and that. And don't even get me into the kind of misogyny that they have in Japan. I mean, women still make, like, less than half what men do.
Yeah.
That's a whole other episode. But
Besides institutional histories that ran in similar circles, one of the most prominent similarities between Grand Sumo and the Yakuza is their built-in secretive and seclusive nature. When things go wrong in their world, they're both loath to turn to outside mediators, preferring to resolve matters in-house behind closed doors. We talked about that like a whole lot, and I mentioned that scholarly article that I found on JSTOR that was about how that law student managed to hang out with the JSA and really kind of feel what they were about. He said that they just kind of gave him things piecemeal. Like at first, they wouldn't even really talk to him. He told them what he wanted to do, and they were like, all right. And then they just kind of ceased contact with him. They didn't say anything to him. And then out of nowhere, someone called him and was like, okay, we'll come by the JSA. We'll let you in on a few things. You're not going to be able to know everything. You can't ask too many questions. And we're just going to kind of just show you things. And he was like, all right. And that's what they did. They didn't even really give him like an itinerary, or they didn't even give him like a reason for half of the things that they did. They just said, this is how it is, and just told him things.
did they show him how they make their money? I bet they didn't show him that. I bet that's a very closely guarded secret.
Well, there's always the ticket sales. There's always the merch. There's the merch sales, and there's also the Koen Kai, the fan clubs, and then the super really rich sponsors.
And the Yakuza.
Well, those super really rich sponsors have changed from respectable corporations and stuff to the
Yeah.
Sumo has yet to embark on serious reforms to deal with long-standing problems, including the system of quasi-stock ownership called Toshiori Meiseki. Is that like the whole Kabu thing?
I'm not sure. When I came across this term in the research that we had been doing, that's kind of what I thought it was.
So I think
What we had been referring to all this time as Kabu.
yeah,
right?
Toshiori Meiseki, but that Toshiori is what they call the elders. So
Oh, yeah.
yeah, so the system of quasi-stock ownership called Toshiori Meiseki, which has been plagued by shady deals and vested interests. So I wonder who's making those shady deals
I
and
think we may know.
whose vested interests those are.
Well, you remember all those Yakuza guys who showed up, like, right there, doyo side? There
Oh,
were, like,
two-
50 of them.
2009 Akibasho.
Yes. So all these Yakuza guys show up. The NHK completely refused to even broadcast it because of this. But, like, apparently they had gotten their tickets from one of the stable masters or something.
That was like a couple of stable masters.
Or a couple of some elders in the JSA. But they had done this because they wanted to cheer up their Yakuza boss who was in prison at the time. And it was just like, the Yakuza isn't even really necessarily an illegal organization, but it's still, like, I guess kind of frowned upon because the NHK didn't want to broadcast it.
It's like this. Okay, so in the cultural consciousness of Japan, the Yakuza are just kind of there. They've always been there. They're not necessarily... they're a criminal element, but they're not necessarily seen as completely horrible, terrible human beings. They're just kind of there,
Because sometimes they do things that the police don't do for the
yeah,
community.
that's exactly what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Is if it ever something happens to where there needs to be law and order and the cops aren't there.
I mean, they used helicopters to rescue people during the tsunami.
Yeah.
back in, what year was that? 2011, I want to say.
Yeah. So they're not just criminals. They're not. I mean, they gamble. They do all of their land sharking and
They're a system outside of the regular system.
Yeah. And, you know, within anthropology and sociology, I mean, things like that do exist, but it's just, I could see how it would be kind of hard for Western audiences to kind of really grasp, you know, the niche that the Yakuza really occupy. But here within, I would say maybe the last 20, 30, maybe 40 years, 20, 30, or definitely 20, 30 years, that there had been a concerted effort to really kind of shut the Yakuza down. And that's something I'll get to in a minute. But
well, specifically looking at how it's influenced sumo, you also had all those rikishi around the same time that got caught doing match fixing.
Yeah.
Because they had like debts to the Yakuza, or because they just didn't want to get like, it was mostly Juryo guys. They didn't want to get like ranked down to Makushita and lose their salaries as well. That was like another motivation, but still.
Didn't you mention something about the Freakonomics? Like what they mentioned in that Freakonomics?
Okay, so I've never read this book, but I actually came across like a PDF file of just this excerpt where it was talking about how I'm bad at math, okay? Let me just preface with that. I do not do math, okay? But apparently these guys are really fucking good at it. And they were able to figure out, using math, that those matches had to have been rigged. Like, a certain large percentage of them have to be rigged. I don't know if that's necessarily true these days.
It was something like 50% of the. It was supposed to be 50% of the time. You know, either he wins or he doesn't. You know, and that's just kind of how it is. But they were seeing like such a skew in how, you know, the results of these matches were going. And then whenever the whole what was it, 2017, when the whole match fixing scandal broke, they were really starting to see that it was a lot of Juryo guys that really were just, they would make arrangements with each other to, you know, okay, well, if you lose this and I'll lose this day and I'll, you know, to basically stop themselves from having to go back into the unpaid ranks and start wiping ass again, you know.
Yeah, I couldn't remember if it was like that incident or there were a couple of separate incidents where you know, Rikishi owed some Yakuza guys like some gambling debts because they were gambling on baseball or gambling on mahjong or golf.
Gambling on the,
how do you even gamble on golf?
I don't know how you
golf
gamble on
golf is
golf.
the most boring fucking sport there is.
But the whole baseball thing, that's a thing. That's like a huge thing. Yeah, that's something that they really do, and it's a really complicated system.
Well, people have tried to let the rest of the world know what's going on behind these closed doors of pro sumo and these connections that are happening.
Yeah.
And sometimes they've ended up disappeared or dead, but I guess we'll get to that in a minute.
Well, it's kind of, you know, how they do the Jungyo tours? They used to do other kind of tours, like around the rural countrysides. And then, you know, the Yakuza were the ones, the local gang leaders would be the ones that would provide people with lodging, food, security, and stuff like that. And then even though they don't really have these tours nowadays, the intricate relationship between sumo and the Yakuza still exists. And this is a quote from a article in TokyoReporter.com in the crime section. At the sumo stables, for example, it is still up to the Yakuza to provide security and transportation, and should there be trouble with a particular wrestler, it'll be the Yakuza who'll keep it away from the media.
Oh.
So I'm sure that relationship just, you know, it's just there, and there's got to be kind of like a mutual kind of admiration for each other that the Yakuza is, you know, funneling in, you know, drugs and women, and, you know,
there was that book that like was talking about like the orgies and the drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
But they even tried to keep that book from coming out because they didn't want people to know about what was going on.
According to the book Yaucho, which means match fixing, by former stable master O Naruto and former Rikishi Seiichiro Hashimoto, tax evasion is rampant. The Yakuza provide a flow of women and drugs to various Rikishi, and many matches are allegedly rigged. A month before the book was published in the late 1990s, both authors died of the same respiratory illness within 15 hours of one another in the same hospital in Nagoya.
Those dudes were poisoned. Okay.
Everyone has.
Those dudes got some, like, fucking cyanide sushi or some shit.
Fucking
Those
fugu.
dudes were fucking poisoned.
Definitely.
I mean, were there any other people in that hospital who died of the same thing? Or was it just these two guys?
Just these two guys?
See, that makes me think there's got to be something going on there. Somebody wanted to either prevent that book from being released, which, I mean, if it was a month ahead of time, that wouldn't really prevent the publishers from... I don't know how publishing works in Japan. But anyway, then they at least wanted revenge for,
pretty much
airing the dirty laundry of the JSA and the Yakuza.
Yeah. Oh, Naruto reportedly decided to spill the beans after he was forced to sell his stable because of money problems, and then the other stable masters didn't give him a retirement party.
Aw, that's a dick move.
That's a total dick move.
Maybe he was a dick. But that doesn't mean he wasn't telling the truth about what was going on.
Yeah. So, there are different factions, within the JSA. We all know of the different Ichiman with the stables and everything.
Yeah.
And there's even factions between those that would say, I really like our foreign wrestlers, and those that like, fuck that, we don't want any foreign wrestlers in any stables.
Yeah, the racists.
Yeah. Well, so to kind of highlight that relationship between the Yakuza and Sumo and those little factions, that exist even within the JSA itself. So let's take a look at the example of Asashoryu. This is a little bit of paraphrasing and a little bit of reading directly from an article by Sarah Norbach. It's called Dirty Diapers, How the Sumo Scandal is a Casualty of the National Police Agency War on the Yakuza.
I hate the name of this article,
I know.
But it does give some pretty good information.
It really does. And this is a news site that is ran by Jake Adelstein. He's a crime beat reporter for a Japanese newspaper, and he is author of the book Tokyo Vice. And I believe the show on HBO, Tokyo Vice, is I think based on his exploits.
Really?
Yeah. And I really wanted to watch it. I watched the first 3 episodes, but I didn't get a chance to finish it. Anyway, so let's go back to Asashoryu. So Mongolian-born sumo wrestler Asashoryu assaulted a civilian and bribed the victim to keep it quiet, but the story got leaked to the media anyway. The resulting scandal forced him to retire, but the victim, and we're putting that in quotes, in this case, reportedly and repeatedly poked and prodded and just provoked Asashoryu, just fucked with him into the point he just couldn't take it, just decked the dude, just punched him out.
Lost his temper.
Mm-hmm. So the victim also allegedly had ties to the Yamaguchi-gumi and other antisocial forces, including the Inagawa-kai, which is now very much under the umbrella of the Yamaguchi-gumi. So what the authorities believe, as well as other Mongolian rikishi, was that Asashoryu was set up by a rival faction within the JSA that wanted to get rid of him and weaken Mongolian influence in sumo. They supposedly did this by outsourcing the work to the Yamaguchi-gumi's Kodokai. Whether or not this was the case, when Asashoryu was questioned by the police, he talked about a lot of things and he aired a lot of grievances. Mm-hmm. So much dirty laundry.
Yes, all them skeletons coming out of those closets.
And all of the guys that were kicked out for smoking weed, they did the same thing. They aired a lot of grievances whenever they were going through their trials and tribulations.
Including certain ones that are in the U.S. now.
Yeah. So there was a note by the author of the article, and this is from her perspective. She says, I wouldn't want to imply that Asashoryu was solely responsible for the baseball gambling investigation or the cause of the story to break, or that he was the sole person that was talking to the police. That would have really put him in a rather precarious position. He's a piece of the puzzle. As early as January of 2010, the National Police Agency had solid intelligence from both the Aichi Prefectural Police Department and the Tokyo Metropolitan Police Department that a number of sumo wrestlers were socializing with the Yakuza and gambling with them as well. Mm-hmm. Jake Adelstein, the Tokyo Vice guy, commented on it in this way. Sumo is involved in organized crime because they've had a symbiotic relationship for years. The wrestlers and the Yakuza have a macho admiration for each other. The Yakuza, by being seen with the sumo wrestlers, acquire status, and the sumo wrestlers get money, booze, food, and women. Smaller training stables don't have big corporate sponsors and need the money the Yakuza offer. He says the average salary of a sumo wrestler is a pittance. Once a wrestler is beholden to the mob, he is vulnerable to demands to throw bouts in an attempt to clear his debt. The Yakuza will then make even more off these rikishi by gambling on these bouts that they know are rigged. Failed sumo wrestlers often end up as Yakuza enforcers. The sumo world and the Yakuza have long been intertwined. Some ex-sumo wrestlers have even become Yakuza bosses.
Kind of like Kingpin from the Spider-Mans. And that whole part about the pittance that they get, that very small sum of money, if any money at all, because most of these rikishi who aren't in the upper divisions, they don't get any sort of salary or anything. Yes, they get food and a place to sleep and
they just
whatnot.
get like an allowance and room and board.
Yes, but in a highly stratified society, in a very hierarchical social structure, those that are on the bottom, those that are being the most exploited, inevitably always will turn to some sort of outside source of income or comfort or material needs or what have you.
Whether
and
legal
that's
or
usually
illegal.
going to be illegal. They're going to turn to crime because in this sort of very hierarchical structured institution, they don't have any other way to get what they need or what they want. I mean, this is why crime exists in any society.
So the website where I had found this article is Jake Adelstein's website, and the article was actually written by
Sarah something?
Yeah, Sarah Norbach. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Anyway, at the end of the article, you always see the comment section. There was
They always tell you, don't read the comments. Don't read them. You're going to regret it. No, they actually had some pretty thoughtful comments on this one.
There was a reader named Kenneth Sharp who asked, is it coincidence that all this get tough policy really started to get implemented after the fall of the LDP? And that's the Liberal Democratic Party in Japan, which is completely different from anything that has that label in the U.S.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It does not mean the kind of liberal or democratic you're probably thinking of.
So Jake Adelstein himself actually responded to this. And what made this really important to me is that it shows that these factions within the JSA aren't just Yakuza factions. They actually have some higher political kind of factions. There's some sort of struggle, some strife going on between these factions on a higher political level. So in response to that question, Jake Adelstein responds, actually, it's because of the fall of the LDP. The National Police Agency has judiciously leaked to the press since 2007 that the Yamaguchi-gumi and the Democratic Party of Japan have a cooperative agreement. It is certainly true that the Yamaguchi-gumi and another major organized crime group told their members to support the DPJ in 2007. No one is exactly sure why. The NPA, that's the National Police Agency, has always been tight with the LDP. The DPJ wants to do things like standardize videotaping of interrogations and give voting rights to foreign residents, all things that the police and the National Police Agency opposed. The DPJ has also opposed all attempts to pass a criminal conspiracy law, which is what the police really want on the books to really dismantle the Yakuza, or at least have the option or the threat of being able to do it. Look at it this way. In some ways, the National Police Agency crackdown on the Yamaguchi-gumi hurts the DPJ, and that's in their best interests. Also, the Yamaguchi-gumi Kodokai began doing things like intimidating the police, photographing police officers' family members, gathering information on detectives, and has been very antagonistic. This hasn't set well with the police. In essence, the fall of the LDP gave the police a great number of reasons to really crack down on organized crime because it's in their best interests to have the LDP back in power.
So it kind of sounds like, and this is something I've been thinking about as far as how the Yakuza functions in Japanese society for a while now. It kind of sounds like almost a dual power system.
Yeah.
You have the regular, in the daylight power system of your political parties and your regular Japanese government, and then the kind of shadowy other power system of the Yakuza.
And not just the Yakuza, but kind of the corruption of the power system that the Yakuza holds and kind of represents. So we spoke earlier about how the Yakuza aren't necessarily... they're not really seen as villains and bad guys in the extent that there always have been villains and bad guys. We talked earlier about how that particular class of society had kind of fallen on hard times because the Meiji Restoration and, then there was World War II. So there's been a whole lot of stuff
Changes in the economy.
Yeah, all kinds of changes.
But just because they're going through hard times doesn't necessarily mean that makes them the victim. They have victimized other groups within
absolutely.
Japanese society a lot.
But they've also done things like you had mentioned whenever they were organizing helicopter rescues after the tsunami.
True. Yeah.
And they feed hungry people. They do a lot of, I hate to say this, but the Yakuza has done some good shit, because of their samurai background.
It kind of reminds me of Al Capone. He would open orphanages and donate a lot of money to the poor. It's almost like reality is very fucking nuanced.
So, the Yakuza aren't necessarily just bad guys, shadowy bad guys lurking in the shadows, and then the Japanese police aren't always going to be, the friendly dudes that are coming to direct traffic and help old ladies across the street. Sometimes shit's fucked up.
Yeah. Shit ain't like that.
Yeah. And even in Japanese society, there's some pretty fucked up shit going on with that power structure of the cops and the Yakuza, the corruption, and Sumo kind of gets caught in the middle.
It's not just sumo, though. I kind of feel like a lot of different aspects of Japanese society get caught up in that stuff as well. So I don't want people coming away from this thinking like, oh, sumo's, super corrupt or whatever because they have ties to all these criminal organizations and whatnot. It's really something that is specific to Japanese society as a whole.
Yeah. And it's a mixture of aspects that is very unique to their society and to their culture. This whole juggling of the balances of power between the Yakuza and the police. If you look at it this way, the Yakuza and the police are almost like foot soldiers of their respective political parties that they're associated with.
Mm-hmm. And then because sumo has fallen on hard times, and because of that hierarchy I mentioned earlier, where there are going to be a lot of rikishi who don't have any power and will try to find it anywhere they can, that's how it gets entangled with all that shit.
And they've been entangled for a long time.
And it's probably not going to end anytime soon, as much as the JSA says they want it to. Well, I think that's pretty much our show. Thank you guys for listening. It was quite a journey. We definitely learned a lot.
We learned a lot.
If you liked the episode, please give us a rating on whatever podcasting platform you're listening. If you want to check out our social media, you can find us at Sumo Punx, spelled with an X.
And on Twitter, we are at Punk Sumo.
Because I fucked up the Twitter. Oh, we also have a Redbubble shop if you want to grab a t-shirt or a mug or a sticker or a, I don't know, what do they have at Redbubble? A dog bandana or something. Oh, we do also have a donation page on Ko-fi. That's ko-fi.com. It's kind of like Patreon, but better. If you want us to be able to travel around to all these tournaments we want to cover, if you want us to make more podcast episodes and not have to worry about spending all our time doing our day jobs,
pretty much,
please donate to our Ko-fi.
Seriously, if you want us to be complete jackasses
in your town,
in your town or wherever you want us to be jackasses, consider donating.
Yes. And I think that's pretty much it. Again, thanks for listening. That's the show. Bye.
Bye.